In New Jersey, a powder keg of injustice set to explode.
In those conditions, it wouldn't take much to kick off a riot.
Decaying relics. Ruins of lost worlds. Sites haunted by the past. Their secrets waiting to be revealed. In the suburban streets of Newark, New Jersey, hide the decaying remains that for some became a symbol of rebellion.
We're just a half hour from downtown Manhattan. It's a pretty typical street with office buildings and a hospital across the way.
But you'll notice one block is a little bit more disheveled than all of the others.
You can barely see in through all the overgrown trees spilling out into the street.
Just through the foliage, you can spot the walls of an imposing building.
The construction within is falling apart, but evidence of its original function still lingers.
You can see different wings and sections and the foundations of a few structures.
There's holes in the roof, rusty metal bars, and vegetation is working its way through the windows.
Despite all this decay, you can still make out what this building once was. And it's the long corridors and the barred doors that are a dead giveaway.
During a decade of change, the violent struggles taking place outside this jail would permeate its walls.
New inmates were pouring in, and the jail was full to the brim.
One of those new inmates, within the course of one generation, his family's narrative arc would go from solitary confinement to the mayor's office.
As a young person, I grew up 4 or 5 blocks from here in downtown Newark. And I was always really interested in abandoned structures, particularly that speak to moments in American history.
Miles Zhang is an urban historian and artist with a lifelong passion for this building.
When I think about why this needs to be preserved, it's the story that this building allows us to tell. And it's a story of the common people that are held behind bars.
This is the Old Essex County Jail. It opened in 1836, a period when the population of Newark was rapidly expanding.
It costs about $70,000 at the time, and that was the largest municipal expense, which makes this the oldest government building in Essex County.
It was designed to be state-of-the-art by the famed architect John Haviland.
And he's kind of known as the father or the inventor of the form of the modern prison. He designs a prison that isolates people in individual cell blocks in confinement for long periods of time in the hope that maybe this makes them better people.
In later years, 2 additional wings and a hospital were added to his design. But as the population of Newark grew, the jail would become disproportionately overcrowded.
Over the course of the 20th century, over 6 million African Americans would leave the South for the North and the West to escape the harsh reality of Jim Crow laws and segregation.
But in Newark, the predominantly white population wasn't welcoming, and police arrests among the African American newcomers were high.
By the 1930s, I believe, Newark is about 20% or so black, but the prison population is 70% black. And so you see increasing incarceration of black men.
With more and more African Americans coming north, by 1967, Newark had become one of America's first majority black cities.
Although Newark's population was now mostly African American, the city's law enforcers remained overwhelmingly white. This imbalance would soon reach a tipping point, and the Old Essex County Jail would be caught in the crosshairs.
By the 1960s, the jail had really deteriorated. Decades of overcrowding had led to poor conditions, and it was about to get much worse.
Tensions between law enforcement and the Black community of Newark were rising.
During the long, hot summer of 1967, over 150 urban rebellions broke out all over the country, and in July, Newark reached a boiling point.
During a traffic stop, a black cab driver was arrested and brutally beaten, sparking a week of protest and violence.
In total, 26 people were killed by the National Guard and 1,400 were arrested in what became known as the Newark Rebellion. Many of those people were taken to the Essex County Jail.
Activist Frederica Bay is a Newark resident who remembers the rebellion. 2 of her siblings were also incarcerated at Old Essex County Jail.
The Tombs, it was called in Newark. Of course, tombs is for dead people. And my brothers and the people who, were confined here, we're in the tombs, while they are living. And I had to come here and put my head on this dirty screen. And when I left out every time, I'd have the screen, the dirty screen print in my forehead. And to think about it, it makes me angry.
On the first night of the Newark Rebellion, controversial writer Amiri Baraka was also thrown in the jail. An influential poet, black activist, and native of Newark, Baraka has attracted criticism for including anti-Semitic elements in his work.
To many, he was one of the greatest black writers of his generation, but to some, his writings reflected violence, misogyny, and homophobia.
Baraka had been pulled over by the police, fiercely beaten, and charged with carrying a weapon.
Amiri Baraka got his head bashed in by the Newark police. He shed blood and was locked up in this place. And he did it while he was advocating for us, for black folk, to be willing to give your life for your people. I honor him.
He was placed in solitary confinement when he entered the jail and detailed his experience years later in his autobiography.
He recounted watching through a window while inmates screamed helplessly as police shot down people in the streets outside. After he was released, Baraka never stopped campaigning for the people of Newark.
That was a volatile time. The Newark rebellions, I remember that. It definitely changed things. The rebellions did. I remember I got my first real job after the rebellion. Things opened up.
But Newark's lawmakers still hadn't addressed the injustices inside the jail.
There's really severe overcrowding in the Essex County Jail. A jail designed for 200 or 300 people at that point had over 500 people confined here. In some of the cells right here, cells barely 4 feet wide by 6 feet deep, you would have 2 people confined here in rooms without electricity. So people are locked in their cells and in this narrow corridor here 24 hours a day for weeks on end.
In those conditions, it wouldn't take much to kick off a riot. And in 1968, the violence spilled over into Essex County Jail.
Several of the inmates in the West Ward, when it's time for them to go back into their cells at the end of the day, they said, we're not going back. We're going to spend this time outside. And so they set fire to the place.
Over the course of 2 hours, the inmates clashed with the wardens, breaking furniture and setting fires.
They burn a hole in the roof. The Newark Fire Department is called in.
In the aftermath of the riot, over 100 inmates were transferred to other locations in order to try to ease the tensions.
Finally, the city was forced to deal with the jail's overcrowding problem. It built a large, modern facility on the outskirts of town. And in 1971, the original jail closed down. Today, the Old Essex County Jail stands as a powerful reminder of Newark's struggle with injustice. Some of the activists that fought for change and were incarcerated here still inspire hope.
Baraka's career would go on to span some 52 years.
Baraka's influence on Newark lasted generations. Almost 50 years after he was locked up in Essex County Jail, his son, Ras Baraka, was elected mayor of the city.
Baraka went on to serve the people of Newark for multiple terms.